Welcome back, everybody. Today we're looking at an introduction to geometry. Basically, we're going to be looking at the different basic parts of geometry so that as we go into this and we start talking more specifically about different types of angles or lines or things like that, you guys will know what it is that I'm actually referring to. So the first thing we're going to look at is a point. Now, when we talk about a point in geometry, a point has no dimensions, meaning it's just a location, which is impossible for us to actually show without actually making something. So when we talk about a point in geometry, we always represent it by just using a dot like this. And if we want to label that point, if we want to make sure we're understanding which point we're talking about, then we just label it something like this, where we put a letter next to it and we say that that is point A. The next thing we're going to look at is a line. And again, this is something that you guys are probably pretty familiar with. In geometry, a line has only one dimension. It has length, and that's all. No width, no depth, which again is impossible for us to draw because anytime we draw something, it has at least two dimensions. But we represent a line by using a more or less straight line with arrowheads on either end, and we label it using two letters typically, and those two letters, in this case, we're going to use 2 points on the line, and we're going to label this as point line, or rather line AB. So there we have line AB. The next thing we're going to look at is a line segment, which is similar to a line. The only difference is, whereas a line has no end, a line segment has an end on each end of the line segment. That was kind of an ugly looking line, so let's try this again. So there we have a line segment. Now a line segment, as you can see, does not have arrowheads on the end, and that's because a line segment has an ending, it has a beginning and an end. So if we were to label a line segment, usually there are 2 points on each end, and we can again label this as line segment AB. Next thing we're going to look at is a ray, and a ray is basically a part of a line. It starts in one direction and it only goes in the one direction. And when you label a ray, this is the first time where we have to be really careful about how we label something. When we talk about lines and line segments, we can start at either A or B and go in either direction. But when you talk about a ray, you have to start with where the ray starts, meaning the line segment where the ray does not continue in that direction. So if we were labeling this one, you would have to call this ray AB. You could not call it ray BA, because it's not going in the direction of the line. The last thing that we're going to look at right now is a plane. Now this one is really difficult to explain, especially on a video, but the basic idea of a plane is that it's a figure that has two dimensions. So if you think about like the top of a table, that would be a plane. Or the top of your desk, or the top of, or a piece of paper, if you laid it out flat, that's the plane. And planes are labeled in two different ways. One of the ways is they will just label the actual plane and they'll just say this is plane, for example, plane X. The other option when people talk about a plane is that they will say that this is plane A, B, C, D. And they'll label just 4 different corners of the plane. Now when we talk about it, I'm usually just going to say plane X, just because it's a little bit easier to say and it's a little bit easier to draw. So these are your 4 different types, or rather 5 different types of basic geometric shapes or figures. And we're going to use these throughout the rest of this year when we're talking about different parts of what we're doing. The next thing we need to know is we need to know how to label all of these. If you are answering a question and I ask you to tell me what the line segment is, I don't want you to have to write out line segment A, B. So here's the way that we symbolically show what all of these are. First off, for points, There's no way around it, you just have to call it point A. That one you're just kind of stuck with. However, with a line, and I'm sure you guys have probably already done this in the past, you put the two letters that are on the line, and then above the line, you're going to draw a two-headed or two arrow-headed line right above it, and we would call this line AB. For a line segment, you take AB again, and this time you just draw a line with no arrowheads on either side. For a ray, I'm pretty sure you guys know what's coming. You draw a line with an arrowhead on one end only, and that would be ray AB. For a plane, again, this is one where you just write it out. We would call this plane, and I'm going to use X. I'm just going to say plane X. Okay, so those are the basics of the different types of things that we're going to be dealing with. And what we're going to do with those empty boxes on the right-hand side of all that is absolutely nothing. I've made the table a little bit too big and I have nothing to do there. So let's move on and let's see how we're going to use this information when we're talking about different parts of geometry. Okay, so here, as you can see, we have a figure and it's labeled with many different points, and what I want you guys to do with this is I'm going to ask you to symbolically represent different parts of this figure. For example, if I said that I wanted you to name 4 different points on this figure, then I would expect that you would do something along the lines of point P, and then, of course, you would label the other 3 points, points M, N, and O. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do is I'm going to ask you to label something, and then I want you to pause the video, do this on your own first, and then I'll come back on, and when you're ready, hit play, and you can see whether or not you got the right things. So first off, I want you to look at this figure, and I want you to name 3 different rays. So pause the video and name 3 different rays in your notes. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video and you're ready to move on. So if we were talking about the different rays on this figure, one of the rays that we could label would be ray NP. And we would label that with an NP with an arrow on the top, and that would be one of our rays. And we can see that from right here on the graph. Remember that we start with the beginning point and move toward the arrowhead as we name it. A couple of the other rays would be ray NO and ray NM. So those are the 3 different rays that we have. The next thing I want you to do, and again I'd like you to pause the video, is I want you to name one line from this figure. So hopefully you paused your video. If we are labeling a line on this, there's actually several different ways that we could label it, but most of you probably chose to do line MO, and we show that with an arrowhead on each end again. However, you could also have said line MN or NO, or for that matter, you could have gone backwards and said ON, OM, NM. There's lots of different ways that we can name a line. All we need is 2 points on a line that goes in any direction. But that is one of the ways that we could name it, so we could say that it is line MO. Okay, the last thing that I want you to do is I want you to name and label 4 different line segments. So go ahead and pause the video and label 4 different line segments. Okay, so if we label the different line segments, hopefully you guys came up with all 4. One of them would be line segment PN, and we show that with just a line above the P and the N. The next one we could label would be MN. That is also a line segment. And we can say that the next one might be NO as a line segment. And then finally, and this might be the one that some of you didn't get, we could have said line segment MO as well. Remember that when we're labeling line segments, all we're talking about is a part of a line, and if I wanted the part of the line that went from M to O, then I could label that as MO. And of course, you could also label all of these in the reverse order, so you could have said NP or NM instead of PN or MN. So using this figure, you can see that there are lots of different points, lines, and rays that we can label. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at a different figure, and we're going to talk about some different features on that as well. Okay, everyone, this is our final figure that we're going to look at, and as you can see, this is a rectangular prism, and this is something that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about later on. But for right now, if we look at this, there are lots of different things that we could label. We could label different points that are on the figure. We could label line segments, and all of those things we could do, but what we're going to focus on is I want you guys to label a plane that you see, some plane that you see on this figure. So I'm going to give you one just to give you a little head start. One of the planes that we could label would be plane ABCD. And the reason that we call this a plane is because we can, if you look at it carefully, you can see that it encompasses 4 different directions. They're all on one side. It's like a box, one side of a box. And if that box were to continue in the direction of the side forever, that's what a plane actually is. It's a 2-dimensional shape, a rectangle, that's 2 dimensions, height and width, and it goes on forever. So looking at this figure, I want you to pause the video and tell me what is another plane that you see. Okay, so hopefully, as you guys looked at this, the next plane that you could see would be the plane on this other side right here, right on the end of the box. And if we label that plane, then we would label it as something like CD, and here's the tricky part, it's not EF, it's FE. When we label a plane, it's very important that you go from one corner to the next in order. You can't go from C to D and then jump across diagonally to E. It has to be in order C, D, F, E. So those are the 2 planes that we see. And the last thing we're going to look at today is something that we haven't talked about yet, and it's called a skew line. And a skew line is basically 2 different lines that never intersect, meaning they never cross each other, and they are not parallel. And this is the hardest thing to try to explain on a 2-dimensional thing like a computer screen, but we're going to give it our best shot. So the way we can look at it is this. If we were to look at the line AD, you can see that it goes straight across the bottom of our screen here. And if we were looking for a parallel line, then we would say that BC is parallel. So what we're looking for, remember, if we're looking for a skew line, is a line that is not parallel. So then the next option would be something like BA. Well, the problem with BA is that it intersects with AD, meaning it crosses the line AD. We can't have that either. So really our only option that we have left is something that's not parallel and something that is also never going to cross that line. And we have a couple of different options, and here they are. Skew lines for AD could be EF. If that line were to continue forever vertically, meaning up and down this way, it would never cross this line. And again, this is hard to explain on a computer screen because if we look at the line, if we were to continue drawing line AD and continue drawing line EF, it looks like they would cross. But that's just the trick of your eyes. Okay, if you were to look at, say, a box, if you were to follow this line on a box from point A to D and continue that line forever, and then looking at this far other corner, if that line were to continue forever on a box, then they actually wouldn't cross. So that's what a skew line is. And if that one is confusing for you, you're not alone. Don't be worried about it. It's not something that's easy to grasp. But in any case, there we have it. Those are the basics of geometry, the stuff that you guys are going to need over the next several weeks. And that should just about do it. So come to class tomorrow prepared and be ready to label and sort and all kinds of stuff. I'll see you guys tomorrow.